They have done this before. That is the first thing you need to understand. Not as a conspiracy theory, not as paranoia from an overly protective fan base, as a documented, provable, historically confirmed fact about what happened to Shedeur Sanders 12 months ago and what appears to be happening again right now. 12 months ago, in the weeks before the 2025 NFL Draft, anonymous NFL coaches and anonymous executives and anonymous evaluators began feeding negative character assessments about Shedeur Sanders to reporters who printed them, spread them, and never once asked the most basic journalistic question that every story based on anonymous sources demands: who benefits? Who gains from this narrative existing right now at this specific moment? Who profits from a first-round quarterback prospect being described as arrogant, uncoachable, the worst interview I've ever conducted, entitled, with no name attached, no accountability, no way for Shedeur Sanders or his representatives to confront the source directly and publicly? 12 months ago, those questions were not asked loudly enough, and Shedeur Sanders, who was a consensus top 5 talent, who had broken NCAA records, who had demonstrated on tape everything you could ask a quarterback to demonstrate, fell to 144th overall, lost $35 million, watched players he was clearly better than walk across the stage ahead of him, while anonymous sources congratulated themselves on a job well done. And now it is March 2026. He is in Berea. He is the de facto starting quarterback. He has the backing of Todd Monken, a man who spent 2 years coaching Lamar Jackson and still said elite playmaking ability when asked about Shedeur at the Combine. He has the backing of Titus Howard, who played alongside Deshaun Watson and who has been following Shedeur since Jackson State and called himself a big fan, unprompted, on camera. And a reporter from The Athletic, a respected outlet, a respected reporter, went on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show on March 9, 2026, and said words that sounded exactly like the words that dropped Shedeur Sanders to the 5th round 12 months ago. He said he had talked to enough people and heard so much that was not very good. He said Sanders did not really watch a ton of film. He said Sanders had to be shown how to watch film. He said Sanders did not know when he was hot. He said Sanders did not know what he was looking at in coverages. He said all of that on a local Cleveland sports show attributed to anonymous sources about the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And when the backlash erupted, when the entire Browns fan base and half the national NFL media said this sounds exactly like what they did to him before the draft, Jason Lloyd did not retract it. He doubled down. He went on 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland and said he stood by every word. He was not playing dumb. He was not going to ignore what his sources told him just because it was Shedeur. And then Shedeur Sanders posted something on X that every person covering this situation immediately recognized as the most deliberate, most precise, most pointed response he could have given without naming names. He posted 4 words. He posted, "Learn to value the opinions of those who care about you, not the noise from everyone else." Not the noise from everyone else. He called it noise, and in calling it noise, he told the entire football world exactly where he stood and exactly who he was. This is the complete story of what Jason Lloyd said, what the evidence says back, what Shedeur Sanders posted in response, what his supporters did next, and why this specific moment, in the middle of the most consequential offseason in recent Cleveland Browns history, matters more than a single anonymous quote on a local sports show should ever matter. Start with Jason Lloyd, because fairness requires acknowledging what Jason Lloyd actually is before addressing what he said. Jason Lloyd is not a tabloid blogger. He is not an attention-seeking social media account with no institutional credibility. He is a reporter for The Athletic, the sports journalism subscription platform that has recruited some of the best beat reporters in the country and that has built its reputation on the quality of its sourcing and the depth of its access. Lloyd covers the Cleveland Browns. He has sources inside the building. He talks to people in the organization. He talks to people connected to the organization. He talks to coaches and scouts and front office personnel who trust him enough to share information they do not share publicly. That is what beat reporters do. That is what makes them valuable. And when Jason Lloyd says he has talked to enough people and heard so much that is not very good, he is describing a genuine pattern of sourcing, not fabricating a story from nothing. The question is not whether his sources said those things. The question is whether his sources are telling the truth. And the specific evidence available on that question is significantly more complicated than Lloyd's initial presentation suggested. Lloyd appeared on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show and did not hold back in his blunt assessment of Shedeur Sanders' son, saying, "This is the spot that I'm in with Shedeur. I've talked to enough people and heard so much about him that's not very good. What am I supposed to do with that? Am I supposed to play dumb and come in here and say, 'Play the kid, let's give it a shot'? When you hear over and over that he doesn't watch a ton of film, that he had to be shown how to watch film, doesn't know when he's hot, doesn't know what he's looking at in coverages, am I supposed to ignore all that? Then, when you look at the data, it is what it is, and he didn't play well. People want me to ignore that because it's Shedeur." Newsweek. Am I supposed to ignore all that? That sentence, the rhetorical defensive posture of a reporter who has made a claim and now is being asked to justify it, is the most revealing thing Lloyd said in that entire appearance. Because the answer to his question is no. He is not supposed to ignore what his sources tell him. He is supposed to scrutinize it. He is supposed to ask why those sources are saying it. He is supposed to ask what those sources gain from saying it. He is supposed to consider the institutional context in which those sources exist and whether that context creates incentives to damage a specific player's reputation at a specific moment in the off-season calendar. And he is supposed to weigh what his sources say against the observable evidence that exists independently of what his sources claim. Because observable evidence and anonymous source characterizations are not equal. One of them can be checked, one of them cannot. Let's check the observable evidence. Sanders, who has a reputation for being the first guy on the field and the last guy to leave the building, had Lloyd's sources saying he didn't really watch a ton of film. Yardbarker. The first guy on the field, the last guy to leave the building. That reputation, which is his public reputation, documented in multiple profiles and player interviews and team facility access pieces from last season, does not come from nowhere. It comes from people who watched him at the facility every day and described what they saw. The same facility where Lloyd's anonymous sources also work. The same building where Lloyd's sources say he does not watch film. Two different characterizations of the same person in the same building. One public and named, one private and anonymous. And the specific detail that makes the anonymous characterization harder to accept at face value is this. Sanders has been surrounded by NFL stars his whole life. He used to work out with Tom Brady, had former NFL staffers working with him at Colorado, and happens to be the son of one of the greatest coverage players to ever lace them up, Yardbarker. Tom Brady, the player who is universally described by every teammate, every coach, every analyst who has ever spent time around him as the most obsessive film studier in the history of professional football. The player whose preparation, whose specific, systematic, relentless approach to studying defenses and tendencies and coverages is cited by every person who knows him as the primary reason his career lasted as long as it did at the level it did. Shedeur Sanders worked out with Tom Brady as a college quarterback before the NFL. He had access to the specific preparation philosophy and the specific film study methodology of the greatest quarterback in NFL history, and Jason Lloyd's anonymous sources say he had to be shown how to watch film.
Multiple fans and observers on social media noted that Shedeur was watching film on the Browns' defense during training camp, that the first thing he does when he comes off the field is watch the iPad, and that he did so with the head coach every day. Pro Football Network, watch the iPad, first thing when he comes off the field, every day with the head coach. Those are not rumors. Those are direct observations from people who were present at the training facility and who watched Shedeur Sanders reach for an iPad between series to review what had just happened on the field. The iPad detail is specifically significant because NFL film study is not done the way it was done in the 1990s, where players sat in a dark room watching 16mm game film. It is done on tablets, on laptops, in the locker room between series, and in the hotel room the night before a game, and on the plane home after a loss. And the specific observation that Sanders reaches for his iPad when he comes off the field, the specific technology-based observation that anyone with eyes and access to the Browns' training facility can make, directly contradicts the characterization that he does not watch film. Fans noted that Lloyd has been pushing an anti-Shedeur narrative from the beginning, even being called out for embellishing and fabricating stories about the former Colorado star. Most fans aren't buying Lloyd's information or his sources. Pro Football Network. The history matters, because if this were the first time Jason Lloyd had published a negative characterization of Shedeur Sanders from anonymous sources, the isolated claim would deserve to be evaluated on its own merits. But it is not the first time. Lloyd has been a consistent source of negative Shedeur coverage since before the draft. He was one of the reporters who pushed the narrative that led to Sanders' draft slide. He has been, in the specific language that Sanders' defenders use, on an island with multiple of his most damaging characterizations, not corroborated by other reporters, not confirmed by multiple independent sources, just Lloyd. And now Lloyd is doing it again, in the same off-season cycle where Sanders is trying to secure the starting job, in the same window where the organization is evaluating whether to commit to him or draft an alternative, at the exact moment when a negative narrative could do the most damage to his position in the open competition that Todd Monken declared. Noted Shedeur Sanders critic Tony Grossi, who had a bit of an infamous encounter with Sanders when the Browns drafted him, has never had something similar to say about him, and he's also well connected in the building. Yahoo Sports. Tony Grossi, the ESPN Cleveland reporter who has his own complicated history with Sanders, who was in the room when the Browns drafted him, and whose interaction with Sanders in that moment became a minor news story itself, has never said anything like what Lloyd said. And Grossi is also well connected in the building, also has sources, also talks to people who know what is happening at the facility. And what Grossi, who is not exactly a champion of Shedeur Sanders, has never reported is that the quarterback does not watch film. That specific, significant absence of corroboration from a reporter with equivalent access and a track record of criticizing Sanders is the most important data point in evaluating whether what Lloyd reported is true. Lloyd doubled down during an appearance on 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. He said he stood by the report and said he was not going to ignore what his sources told him just because it was Shedeur. Yardbarker. Doubled down, on the radio, in the same market, in front of the same audience. The specific stubbornness of a reporter who has been publicly challenged and who is choosing to dig in rather than add context or acknowledge the complicating evidence is itself informative. Not necessarily proof that he is wrong, but proof that he is not applying the same scrutiny to his own sources that he is demanding everyone apply to the player he is reporting on. And then Shedeur Sanders responded. Not on television, not in a press conference, not through an agent, on X, personally. 4 words. Sanders wrote, "Learn to value the opinions of those who care about you, not the noise from everyone else." Clutch points. Not the noise from everyone else. That is the response of a man who has been here before, who has watched anonymous sources damage his reputation in the most consequential moment of his professional life and found a way to survive it, who fell to 144th overall and celebrated with his family because the organization that took him had coaches and teammates who would care about him, rather than anonymous sources who would undermine him. He has been through the noise. He knows what it is. He knows where it comes from. He knows what it is trying to do. And he responded, not with anger, not with a point-by-point rebuttal, not with a demand for Jason Lloyd to name his sources. He responded with the specific, settled calm of a person whose identity does not depend on what anonymous sources say about him.
That response, 4 words, posted on a Friday morning, deliberately aimed at a specific situation while maintaining complete plausible deniability about what exactly he was responding to, is the most revealing thing Shedeur Sanders has shown about who he is since he made the Pro Bowl. Because the choice to respond that way, not to engage the criticism directly, not to fire back with emotion, not to give the story more oxygen by making it about him versus Lloyd, is the choice of a player who has learned something from the draft slide, who has processed what happened and why, and developed a specific strategy for navigating a media environment that has demonstrated, twice now, that it is willing to use anonymous sources to damage his reputation at moments of maximum vulnerability. He is not fighting the noise, he is rising above it. And in doing so, he is showing Todd Monken and Andrew Berry and Titus Howard and every other person in that building who is trying to evaluate whether he is the right quarterback for the Cleveland Browns exactly the kind of competitive intelligence and emotional maturity that the position demands.
Lloyd claimed the 2026 Pro Bowler performed poorly in his rookie season because he does not watch films and had to be taught how. People want me to ignore that because he was a 5th-round pick, and if they hit on a 5th-rounder, it erases Deshaun, Lloyd continued. If they hit on a 5th-rounder, it erases Deshaun. That sentence, buried in Lloyd's extended comments, is the most honest thing he said in the entire exchange. Not an observation about film study, a political observation about organizational dynamics. The Browns spent $230 million fully guaranteed on Deshaun Watson. The people inside that organization who made that decision, who surrendered 3 first-round picks and bet everything on a quarterback who played 19 games in 4 years, have a specific institutional interest in the narrative that Shedeur Sanders is not the answer. Because if Sanders succeeds, the Watson decision looks even worse by comparison. Every win Sanders gets is a data point in the argument that you did not need to spend $230 million guaranteed on the wrong quarterback. Every positive performance is an implicit indictment of the organizational judgment that produced the Watson contract. And the people inside the building who were there when that contract was signed, who participated in that decision, who defended it publicly, who are still working for the Cleveland Browns, despite the fact that it was one of the worst financial commitments in NFL history, have a reason to want Shedeur Sanders to fail. Not because they hate him, because his success is their failure. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is organizational psychology. It is how institutions protect themselves from accountability. And the specific moment when anonymous sources inside an organization start feeding negative characterizations of a young player to respected reporters, right at the moment when that young player is competing for the job that determines whether the previous regime's catastrophic decision gets fully exposed or partially obscured, is the moment when the motivation behind those anonymous sources deserves at least as much scrutiny as the content of what they are saying. Shedeur Sanders posted, "Learn to value the opinions of those who care about you, not the noise from everyone else." He is in Berea. He is working. He has the head coach who spent 2 years with Lamar Jackson saying elite playmaking ability. He has a veteran offensive lineman who played alongside Deshaun Watson, calling himself a big fan and saying he has been following him since Jackson State. He has Mel Kiper Jr. asking what in the hell else the kid needs to do. He has 41 days until the NFL draft, 41 days until Andrew Berry walks to the podium in Green Bay and tells the entire world, with the pick he makes, whether this organization actually believes in the quarterback wearing their jersey. And he has Jason Lloyd on a local sports show with anonymous sources saying the exact same things that anonymous sources said 12 months ago. The same noise, the same cycle, the same attempt to use the same playbook that worked in the 2025 draft to reshape the narrative before the 2026 draft. Not the noise from everyone else. He is not listening. And if the last 12 months of his life have demonstrated anything, it is that choosing not to listen was always the right decision.
All reporting in this broadcast is sourced from Dog Pound Daily, Yahoo Sports, the Shadow League, Total Pro Sports, Yardbarker, Cleveland Browns Community, Brown Nation, Fox Sports Shedeur Sanders player page, and the official X post from Shedeur Sanders on March 13, 2026. All quotes from Jason Lloyd are verbatim as reported by multiple outlets from his appearance on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show and 92.3 The Fan. All information reflects confirmed reporting as of March 27, 2026.